But despite being wobbled, he loads up on a big right hand that lands directly on the chin of Rodtang, but he just shakes it off. Pyrrhic has him looking like Pernell Whitaker, just barely getting out of the way of these shots barely grazing. Rodtang's skill set is underrated because he has a lot within it. I've seen him approach fights from so many different styles, from elbows and knees, which is a different Muay Thai style, to primarily kicks. That's another type of Muay Thai style. And then what he's primarily known for, boxing, pressure, forward pressure, being a hunter. And then I've also seen him be a great counterpuncher. And in this fight in particular, we get like a couple different styles that he switches in between, which we're going to talk about. And I wanted to look at that. And his opponent, Dennis Pyrrhic, is also a tough, game, hard-hitting fighter. So this fight was very entertaining. So let's talk science. In this small little sequence early on in the fight, there's a lot that goes on. For one, he kind of steps in with that leg, and it looks like it could be a leg kick. And so Pyrrhic is automatically putting that leg up to check. And then Rodtang is slapping on the guard with the left to kind of like manipulate it, occupy it. And then he frames with the right. And so Pyrrhic is looking to counter because he's assuming that no leg kick is coming because offense already came prior to it. So Rodtang kind of delays the leg kick with the guard manipulation up top, using his hands. And then the right hand also, the shoulder gets in the way of the potential left foot counter. It's a lot that goes on in that small sequence. He did a good job throwing off Pyrrhic's defensive timing. But then speaking of that, like when it comes to setups, feinting, setting up a shot, Pyrrhic does a good job of like having these stutter step entries. So he's tried to throw a leg kick right there. He pulls it back because Rodtang gets out of the way. And so what he does now is he stutter steps and then he enters off of that stutter step, and it allows him to get closer to land that leg kick. And later on, he's going to build off of that. And another reason this fight was so interesting is because you rarely see Rodtang get to be the sniper, the long range fighter on the outside, kind of controlling the distance, using his footwork, being defensive, working behind a jab, a very solid jab. Rodtang's jab is actually great. And him getting his head off the center line, circling out, waiting for shots. Again, using that jab, and then that right hand from Dennis is monstrous, but his distance control is also another underrated aspect. Him being like right at the edge of so many shots and kind of being confident with that. There's a spinning back fist later where it's like very similar, where the shot just barely misses. But then this left hook right here is also similar. He's just controlling distance, controlling range, great footwork, and just knowing if the shot is close enough. But controlling distance also means if you want to disengage, you can disengage. And if you want to engage, then you can also engage. He kind of floats into range using that push kick to serve as like a guide for his entry. And then he steps in, right hand around the guard. We're going to talk about him picking apart the high guard later on. And then he digs with a left underneath the guard. And then Pyrrhic is trying to catch and counter. He gets his head just barely underneath that shot. Rodtang's subtle head movement is also another good part of his game. We'll talk more about that. Frames with the jab, keeps that jab out there. Again, slight movement, and then he disengages. So now the fight is back at range. So he floated into it, made it an inside fight, and as soon as he no longer wanted the inside fight, he just disengaged. So Rodtang pretty early on builds off of this combo, and this combo is so effective for two reasons. First of all, the static high guard of Dennis, and then the second thing is Dennis catching counters. So Dennis waits for a certain side of his guard to get attacked, and once he feels that, he immediately tries to answer back, and he's looking for opportunities to catch Rodtang in between punches. So if Rodtang lands the left to the body and then follows up with a left up top, a double left hook, it's so effective because Dennis is going to want to counter off of that right side, but he's intercepting Dennis before Dennis can open up with that. And that's why that double three combo is so effective in this fight. Dennis does that stutter step entry that I was talking about. He's not just going to blitz straight in. He is going to blitz, but he uses his feet to kind of like switch and jump and lunge, and then he feints the left, and Rodtang pulls out of the way of it. But he keeps moving forward, and then he jumps into that shot. It's a really strange way of closing the distance, but I think that's why it's so effective, because not a lot of people do stuff like that. Dennis puts up the high guard, and Rodtang jabs at it, occupies it, keeps it glued. He purposefully probes at it twice to get it glued to Dennis's head, and then now that it's stuck at the center, he comes around the side, and then Dennis tries to counter, but Rodtang pulls out of the way. They trade jabs and left hooks quite often. particularly Rodtang landing his left hook and Puric landing his jab. So as Puric is jabbing, Rodtang is circling away from the left, and Puric is running into Rodtang's left. So the force is being generated more for Rodtang because of the extra momentum of Puric circling into Rodtang's left hook. But then this time he's actually circling away, but that left hook lands right on the chin, and it actually wobbles Puric a little bit. But despite being wobbled, he loads up on a big right hand that lands directly on the chin of Rodtang, but he just shakes it off. Now this is that calm counterpunching style I was talking about. Rodtang sees the right hand coming, turns away just barely turns away, stays within range to sneak in this little shovel hook, this little uppercut that lands on the chin. It's not a heavy shot, but it's just such a little slick counter. And then at the same time, he loads up the right, just boom, straight right hand, throws Puric off balance. Just those little small counters in between shots, little slight head movements, range control. It's just all those subtleties. And then Puric is going into that static high guard. Static meaning it's not really moving much. It's just like you kind of sometimes like a standing heavy bag. Puric does counter off of it, but when he's stuck right there, it leaves so many opportunities for being occupied, being blinded, the guard being pulled, the guard being manipulated. In this case, he pulls the whole torso down into the knee to the body. When Rodtang wants to be defensive, sometimes he has Puric has him looking like Pernell Whitaker, just barely getting out of the way of these shots barely grazing. He accidentally stuffs that kick with his chest, so he's like shuts down the kick before it can even generate any power. But then he's also ready to attack at any moment, so Puric is disengaging with his hands down, so he can't defend himself in time, get that guard up, so the right hand just slips through. Now this reminded me a lot of when we did Piotr Jan versus Corey Sandhagen, because Piotr Jan would be overextending and falling off balance, throwing big overhands and looping shots, and then he would turn them into a spinning back fist. Here Puric turns it into a spinning back kick, that's really smart. And yeah, I think that's slick. I think that's cool. Now when I say gritty tactical brawler and I try and describe the archetype, it usually looks like this. Within the midst of chaos and seemingly a brawl, there are a lot of subtle technical details that are going on, which is why as he approaches, Rodtang does a little movement with the right glove. Puric is going to respond defensively like how he's been responding to high guard, so he digs underneath the high guard with a nice left to the body. And then you'll see Rodtang's left go up, occupy the high guard, keep it in place, boom, now a right to the body. So he's purposely making that high guard go up so he can dig underneath it. And then this little subtle way to get underneath the counter of Puric, just subtle head movement. And at the same time, when he drops down there, it loads up the left to the body, which is an even more powerful shot because he loaded it up while moving his head. And that gets a big reaction out of Puric, backs him up against the cage. And he keeps working the body, Those subtle technical and tactical details within a gritty brawl. And in this sequence, I think Dennis is setting a trap. I don't know if he starts setting it with this first jab, but he definitely does start setting it with the second jab. He has Rodtang coming forward, and as Rodtang is coming forward, he's dropping into that jab, and he's going to keep Rodtang coming forward so that he can try and time him. You see how he stops, he waits for Rodtang to approach, and then he tries to catch him with a spinning back fist. But I don't know, Rodtang in this fight, his distance control is just immaculate, just being barely out of range of so many dangerous shots. Again, that static high guard, Rodtang is just throwing combos, mixing it up, slap around the guard. Well, not a slap, that's a legitimate left hook. And then he lets Dennis fall forward. As Dennis falls forward, he goes up the middle because the guard widened. So it's just picking apart that high guard. A lot of good stuff in this fight from both men. This was a really good, entertaining fight. You should all watch it in full, support it. ONE FC has a lot of great fights, a lot of great fighters. And I think I might break down one more fight and get that out for y'all. But Fight Scientists, I will see y'all later. Like, subscribe, hit the like button, all that, blah, 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 blah.